What you're going to be challenged is where you're going to put your focus. All right, and I'm going to explain that a little bit through an example. So my father went to West Point and he was a pilot in Vietnam. He flew into combat zones and he would pick up wounded soldiers and dead wounded soldiers and parts of wounded soldiers. And he would fly out of combat zones and take them to safety or hospitals. And he was shot down and his co-pilot was killed. He came back from that experience quite traumatized. And at that point in time, nobody had a term of PTSD. Didn't exist, and there wasn't therapy or anything else like that for these people that came back really ravaged. But he came back into a home where there were two little girls who didn't want to eat their peas. Or they fought about their dollies. And here's this person who's just been through really the most horrendous experience a human could probably have, and he's suddenly having to deal with these very basic, simple things of children, which is totally valid for the kids, right? And his experience was valid, but those two together clashed. So we were brought up with a lot of aggression and violence in our home, both verbal and physical. Nobody at fault for that, but that's what the situation was. So what I realized when I had my children was I only had what I had learned from my parents. What else was I going to have to parent my children? So I had to get very clear about what was right in front of me without the history of what I had grown up with and what I was dealing with, but I had now children that I wanted to parent a certain way and what was mine to do in parenting them. I had to get very clear and I had to get very present and leave my personal history behind me, and that took a lot of work. I did not just do that overnight, trust me, okay? But that process was a big contribution of why I do the work I do today. So what I needed to do was I needed to go back to a very pure place within myself. But I really need to go to a very clear place that was not tainted with what I had experienced as a child, because I couldn't be a parent the way I wanted to be if I was still tainted with that. And then best practices, and that's literally what I did. I started looking at what are the best practices of communication, of discipline, whatever it is. You know, I did my training as a mediator. I started doing communication trainings. I did work with nonviolent communication. I'd have, variety of different certifications to try and find best practices that I could actually implement in my parenting situation. Now this sounds all very structured and very neat, and of course I woke up in the morning and I just had these little boxes and that's how I went through life, right? Not. You can ask my children, that's not how it happened. But over time and years and days and hours, I was able to retrain myself and my neurology and how I was as a parent.
Was this a wholesale action that you did all at once or small steps along the way?
Great question. It was definitely small steps, beginning with the intention. And quite honestly, at the beginning, it felt so monumental. I mean, I remember the one situation where my former husband was gone about 20 days a month, and I was alone 20 days a month. I lived overseas. I had no family around. And my son he used to sleep in 20-minute snatches. Can you imagine? For the first 2 years of his life. Whew. And I remember laying in bed one night where he was, he was awake, whatever it was. And I just remember laying there thinking, I feel so aggressive. This is not good. This is not a good situation. What am I going to do? And so I came back to that intention of, I want to be love. How are you going to do that? And I had no idea. But in that night, in that situation, the best thing that I could do was first to just breathe for myself. And then I just went to him and talked to him very calmly. That was the first little baby step. And the next night I could do it again a little bit. And then with time I could do it in different situations. So for me in this situation, it was absolutely incremental. There are other situations that were so clear I could change them like that. But this was such a developmentally large piece for me in my life and the way I had been raised, that it was definitely very small steps over a very long period of time. But I can promise you this, if I could become the kind of parent that I now am today, anybody can change anything ever. I swear, that's really the truth. which is why I do the work I do. If I didn't believe that people could change things, I wouldn't be sharing this with you. Yeah, good question.